Jason Reynolds had always been a curious man, but today his curiosity led him deep into an uncharted part of a remote planet. He was part of a small mining crew, sent to extract rare minerals from the planet's surface. The job was simple, but the planet's mysteries fascinated him. This particular area, known for its dangerous terrain and wild creatures, had always been off-limits. But Jason couldn't resist the urge to explore. His crew had already mined their share of materials, and Jason knew they wouldn't stay long on this planet. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the jagged landscape, Jason spotted something unusual. A strange, glowing mark on the ground. It wasn't natural, and it wasn't something he had seen before. Kneeling down, Jason brushed aside the dirt and dust. Beneath the surface, a stone slab lay hidden. The markings on it seemed almost ancient. They weren't of any language he recognized, and the symbols seemed to pulse faintly under his touch. With a grunt, he pushed against the slab, and to his surprise, it moved with little effort. Slowly, the stone slid aside, revealing a narrow passage leading underground. A sense of excitement and dread washed over him. Was this an old ruin, some long-lost artifact, or something much more dangerous? Without a second thought, Jason grabbed his flashlight and descended into the tunnel. The air grew cooler as he moved further in, the passage narrowing until it opened up into a large cavernous room. His flashlight flickered across the walls, revealing strange murals and carvings. It looked like an ancient temple or tomb, lost to time and hidden from the galaxy for who knows how many centuries. Then he saw her. Lying unconscious in the center of the room was a figure, surrounded by shimmering, intricate designs carved into the floor. At first glance, she appeared to be an alien, her skin a pale shade of blue, with markings along her arms and face that seemed to glow faintly. Her long, silver hair cascaded across her shoulders, and her delicate, elf-like ears twitched slightly, as if responding to his presence. Jason's heart raced. This wasn't what he had expected to find. The figure before him seemed otherworldly, a being of beauty and mystery. He couldn't tell if she was alive or dead, but something about her called to him. She wasn't just an artifact. She was real, and she seemed important. He crouched beside her and reached out, his fingers brushing against her cool skin. He half expected her to wake up, but she remained still, breathing faintly. Jason knew he should report this discovery to his crew, but something deep inside told him not to. The feeling was overwhelming, almost as if he was meant to find her. He gently lifted her into his arms, careful not to disturb the strange, glowing markings beneath her. As he carried her back through the dark passage, Jason couldn't help but wonder, who was she? And why had she been left here, in this forgotten tomb, on this far-off planet? Little did he know, this discovery would change his life, and the galaxy, forever. Jason walked quickly through the darkened passage, the mysterious alien woman still cradled gently in his arms. His heart raced not just from the weight of her in his arms, but from the gravity of the situation. What had he just found? Was she important? Who was she? These questions bounced around in his head as he emerged from the tunnel, stepping back into the cold, dry air of the mining base. He moved swiftly toward the small medical unit they had on site. Jason was no doctor, but he had some basic knowledge of first aid, and it was enough to help in a situation like this. As he laid the woman down on one of the medical tables, he noticed how fragile she seemed, almost as if she had been in stasis for an incredibly long time. Her skin, though pale and marked with faint, glowing symbols, looked flawless and untouched by age. There was an ethereal quality to her that made Jason wonder if she was truly human, or something more. The medical equipment hummed to life as Jason hooked her up to basic monitoring devices. Her breathing was steady, but her pulse was faint. She was alive, but just barely. He looked at her, puzzled. She wasn't like anything he had ever seen before. She had the features of a being from another world. Her sharp cheekbones, slender figure, and long silver hair. But the most striking thing about her were her ears. They were small, pointed, like those of an elf from ancient legends. It seemed impossible, yet here she was. Jason sat down next to her, watching her closely. Hours passed, and he stayed at her side, unsure of what to do next. He couldn't understand why he felt such an intense connection to this stranger. His logical mind told him to call for help, to get back to the mining crew and report this discovery. But something told him to wait, that this moment was bigger than anything he could explain. Suddenly, the silence in the room was broken by a soft gasp. Jason froze, eyes wide. The alien woman's eyes fluttered open, revealing two deep pools of vibrant green. Her gaze was distant at first, unfocused, as if she were still trapped between consciousness and sleep. Then her eyes found Jason's, and for a brief moment, they locked. Her voice was quiet but strong. Where am I?" Jason's heart pounded. He wasn't prepared for this. "You're safe," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "You're on a mining base. I found you in a cave, and I brought you here." The woman blinked slowly, her expression confused. "I don't remember. How long has it been?" Jason hesitated. "I don't know. I found you deep underground, like you'd been hidden away. You were unconscious." The woman sat up slowly, her movements graceful, though her strength seemed weak. Her eyes scanned the room, and then she turned her gaze back to Jason. "You are human." Jason nodded, unsure of what else to say. "Yeah, I'm human. What are you? Who are you?" A look of recognition flashed across her face, though she quickly covered it with a veil of confusion. I am. I should not be here. My people, they will be looking for me." She paused, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am the last Heir." "The last Heir," Jason repeated, now completely confused. "To what?" She looked at him with a sense of solemnity, her expression serious. "To the throne of the Quirian Empire. I am the princess." Jason's mind raced. He was holding the last Heir to an alien empire. The gravity of the situation finally began to hit him. This was no ordinary encounter. It was something far greater, something that would change everything. But he didn't know how yet. All he could do was help her and find out what this mysterious princess meant for his world. The days that followed were filled with questions and confusion. Jason couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious woman he had found. Her name was Lyra, and as she recovered, she told him more about herself and the empire she came from. She explained that her people, the Quirians, were once rulers of a vast galactic empire, but they had been overthrown by a ruthless enemy years ago. The usurper had killed her mother, the queen, and scattered the royal family to the farthest corners of the galaxy. Lyra, as the last remaining Heir, had been hidden away for her protection. As Lyra regained her strength, she began to train herself again. Her abilities were unlike anything Jason had ever seen. She could move with incredible speed, her senses sharper than any human's. The glowing markings on her skin seemed to pulse with energy, especially when she focused. Jason learned that these marks were a sign of her royal bloodline, granting her control over powers that were, to him, almost supernatural. Jason couldn't help but be amazed. This wasn't just an alien. She was royalty, a survivor of a war that had destroyed her people. He had no idea what kind of trouble he had stumbled into, but he couldn't turn back now. His own life felt intertwined with hers. He had promised to keep her safe, and he meant it. One night, while they were resting in a small cabin outside the mining base, everything changed. The faint hum of a ship's engines grew louder as it approached the base. Jason's heart skipped a beat. He had a bad feeling about it. Lyra was already on her feet, her expression tense. "They're here," she whispered. "The hunters. I can feel them." Jason's mind raced. Hunters. Who were they? Who's coming after you? Lyra's face grew more serious. "They are mercenaries sent by the usurper. They are searching for me, and they will stop at nothing to capture me." Jason quickly grabbed his gear and moved toward the window, peeking outside. He could see several ships landing nearby, their sleek designs unmistakable. Military ships. They were well equipped, and it was clear that they were not here for friendly negotiations. This was bad. Very bad. "We have to go," Lyra said urgently, already moving toward the door. "If they find me, they will bring me back to the usurper, and they will kill you for helping me." Jason's mind raced. The mercenaries were close, and he had no time to waste. "What do we do?" Lyra didn't hesitate. "We run." The two of them dashed into the night, moving quickly through the woods surrounding the base. Jason had no idea where they were going, but he knew they couldn't stay here. The mercenaries were ruthless, and they would stop at nothing to track them down. As they moved through the thick forest, Jason kept a careful watch. His instincts screamed that they were being followed. The rustle of leaves behind them sent chills down his spine. Lyra, moving with remarkable grace, was always a step ahead, but she too could feel the danger closing in. After hours of running, they reached an old, abandoned structure, a rusted shipwreck half buried in the earth. It seemed like a good place to hide. Jason turned to Lyra, hoping for a break. "We can stay here for a while. We need to figure out what to do next." But Lyra shook her head. "They'll find us here. We need to get off this planet. Only then will we be safe." Jason nodded. He didn't know how they were going to escape, but he did know one thing. His life was no longer just about surviving. It was about protecting Lyra, no matter the cost. The chase had begun, and there was no turning back now. The following morning, Jason and Lyra set off again, their escape from the mercenaries hanging heavily over them. They moved quickly through the thick woods, careful not to leave a trail. Jason wasn't a soldier, but his instincts were sharp, and Lyra's heightened senses made her an invaluable guide. She seemed to know every turn, every hidden path in the forest, and with each passing moment, Jason grew more impressed by her strength and determination. They stopped only when necessary, brief moments of rest, a drink of water, and a quiet conversation before continuing their journey. Lyra spoke little about her past, but Jason didn't press her. She had clearly been through much, and her desire to remain out of sight was understandable. But as they moved deeper into the wilderness, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of options. The mercenaries were closing in. There had to be somewhere they could go for help. That was when they stumbled upon an old, hidden cabin, barely visible through the overgrown trees. Jason's heart skipped a beat. "This doesn't look like it's been used in years," he said, looking around at the abandoned structure. It was a small shack, covered in moss, with its windows dark and covered by thick wooden planks. Lyra stopped and studied the cabin, her eyes narrowing. "It's not safe," she said quietly. "This is a place I once came to, long ago. But it's not just an old cabin. There's something more here." Jason raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Lyra stepped forward, motioning for him to follow. "There's a group, rebels, loyal to my mother, the Queen. They're the last of my people who didn't give up the fight. If we're lucky, they're still here." Jason was skeptical, but had no better options. "So we're going to meet them?" he asked. Lyra nodded. "If they're still alive, they'll help us. But we have to be careful. They won't trust you right away." Jason didn't like the idea of going into another unknown situation, but he trusted Lyra. If anyone could help them, it was these rebels. And if they didn't help, well, at least they would know they tried. They approached the cabin cautiously, moving as quietly as possible. When they reached the door, Lyra knocked 3 times, a strange pattern that Jason didn't understand. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a woman with dark eyes and a hardened expression. "Who's there?" the woman demanded, her voice sharp and commanding. She was armed, and her posture suggested she was ready for a fight. Lyra stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "It's me, Lyra, daughter of Queen Heir. I've come for help." The woman's eyes widened at the mention of Lyra's name. She lowered her weapon slowly, but suspicion lingered in her gaze. Lyra? But how? There's no time to explain, Lyra said urgently. We're being hunted. Mercenaries are after me. I need your help. The woman hesitated for a moment, then looked at Jason. Her eyes narrowed. And this human? What's his role in all of this? Lyra glanced at Jason, then back at the rebel. He's my protector. He saved me. Without him, I wouldn't be alive right now. The woman studied Jason carefully. After a long pause, she stepped aside, allowing them both inside. You're lucky I don't shoot first and ask questions later, she muttered, though her tone softened a little. Come in, quickly. The cabin was small, but inside, it was warm and filled with people. They looked like they hadn't seen a proper meal in days, their clothes worn and patched. They all turned to look at Lyra, their expressions a mixture of surprise, disbelief, and cautious hope. Lyra, the woman said, introducing herself. I'm Kira. These are the last of the rebels. We've been waiting for you. And now, it seems we have a lot of work to do. Jason felt a small sense of relief. They weren't alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, with these rebels' help, they could stand a chance against the mercenaries and the usurper who sought to control Lyra's fate. But there was no time to relax. The battle for survival was just beginning. The days that followed in the rebel hideout were tense. Jason and Lyra spent their time strategizing with Kira and the rest of the rebels, planning their next moves. The group was small but determined. Most of the rebels had lived through the fall of the Quirian Empire, and they all shared a burning desire to restore what had been lost. But they knew that the usurper's forces were strong, and any move they made could put them all in danger. Lyra, meanwhile, had been training with the rebels. Her abilities, though extraordinary, had to be refined. She was still adjusting to the power that surged within her. The glowing markings on her skin would pulse whenever she focused her mind. But it wasn't enough yet to face the mercenaries or the enemy empire. Jason couldn't help but watch her. There was something both beautiful and terrifying about her. Her presence was commanding, but she was also vulnerable. He saw the uncertainty in her eyes whenever she trained, the doubt that lingered in her mind. She wasn't used to being in control of this power, and it weighed heavily on her. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Jason found Lyra standing alone outside the cabin. She was gazing at the stars, her expression distant. The sky above was clear, and the stars seemed to shine brighter on this planet than anywhere Jason had ever seen. He stepped closer, not wanting to disturb her, but also feeling an urge to talk. You've been quiet lately, Jason said softly, standing beside her. Lyra didn't look at him but gave a small nod. I don't know how to use this power. It feels like a part of me, but at the same time, it's something I can't control. I'm afraid I'll hurt someone. I don't want to become a weapon. Jason looked at her, his heart aching for her. You're not a weapon, Lyra. You're a person. This power, it's part of you, but it doesn't define who you are. Lyra turned to face him, her eyes searching his face for sincerity. But what if I fail? What if I can't live up to what my people expect of me? What if I'm not strong enough to reclaim my throne? Jason took a step forward, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. You're stronger than you know. You've already shown more strength than anyone could have expected. It's not about living up to other people's expectations. It's about what you want. And right now, you're here, helping people who believe in you. Lyra blinked, surprised by his words. Slowly, a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. You really believe that? Jason nodded. I do. You've already helped me more than I can say. You gave me a purpose when I didn't have one. And I'll help you as much as I can, no matter what happens. For the first time in days, Lyra's expression softened. She didn't look as uncertain, as lost. Instead, she looked like someone who was starting to believe in herself again. The next day, Lyra trained harder than she ever had before. She wasn't just practicing her powers, she was embracing them. The glowing symbols on her skin brightened with each movement, as if they were responding to her growing confidence. The more she focused, the more she realized the truth. This power wasn't something to be afraid of. It was a part of who she was, and if she could learn to control it, it could help her save her people. As the days passed, the rebels began to notice the change in Lyra. Her training sessions became more powerful, her control over her abilities sharper. She was starting to become the leader they had hoped for, the one who could restore the Quirian Empire. And as much as Jason feared the battles ahead, he knew one thing for certain. Lyra was ready. They had a long road ahead of them, and the danger wasn't over. But Jason could see the fire in her eyes. She was no longer just a lost heir. She was a force to be reckoned with, and she was ready to take back her throne. The morning air was crisp, and the rebels had been busy preparing for the upcoming confrontation. They knew that the usurper's mercenaries were closing in on them, and it was only a matter of time before they would be forced into battle. Jason and Lyra worked alongside the others, fortifying the cabin and setting traps around their camp to slow down any attackers. Tension hung thick in the air. Everyone knew the stakes were high. Lyra's training had come a long way. She was no longer the unsure woman who had arrived on this planet. Her powers were stronger, more controlled. The glowing symbols on her skin pulsed softly whenever she focused, and she could now manipulate elements around her with ease. Wind, fire, even the earth itself. Her confidence had grown, and the rebels, who had once been uncertain of her, now saw her as the leader they needed. But as the preparations continued, Jason couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach. Something didn't feel right. It wasn't until the middle of the afternoon that his suspicions were confirmed. Jason had been keeping watch when he noticed one of the rebels, a man named Dorian, acting strangely. He had been quiet for the past few days, keeping to himself, and Jason had found it odd. As Dorian moved into the woods, Jason followed him at a distance, careful not to be seen. Dorian led him to a small clearing where two figures stood waiting. Mercenaries, their faces hidden behind dark helmets. Jason's blood ran cold. His instincts screamed for him to turn back, to warn the others. But he couldn't move. He watched in shock as Dorian exchanged a few words with the mercenaries, then handed them something, a small glowing device. It was a tracker. Dorian had betrayed them. He had sold them out. Jason's mind raced. He couldn't believe it. Dorian had been one of the first rebels to welcome Lyra, promising to help her regain her throne. Yet now, here he was, working with the very people who sought to capture her. This changed everything. The rebel camp was no longer safe. Jason backed away, careful not to alert Dorian to his presence. He rushed back to the cabin, his heart pounding in his chest. When he arrived, he found Lyra and Kira planning their next move. He didn't waste any time. "We've been betrayed," Jason said, his voice urgent. "Dorian is working with the mercenaries. He's given them a tracker to find us." Lyra's face went pale, but Kira was quick to react. "We need to move. Now." Jason nodded, grabbing his gear. They had no time to waste. The mercenaries would be here soon, and the only way to survive was to get out of the cabin before they arrived. The rebels, once so confident, now moved in a panic, gathering what little they could carry and preparing to flee. Lyra stood by Jason's side, her face set in determination. "We will not let them capture me," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that had begun to creep into her heart. "I'm the last of my bloodline. I will not let the usurper win." Jason could see the resolve in her eyes, and it strengthened his own. No matter what happened, they couldn't let Dorian's betrayal be the end of this journey. They had come too far, and Lyra had become something more than just a princess. She was a symbol of hope for her people. As they prepared to leave, the sound of distant engines reached their ears. The mercenaries were close. They had no choice but to fight or flee. But Jason knew one thing for sure. This betrayal had changed everything. They were no longer just running from danger. They were now fighting for their lives, and the war for Lyra's throne had just begun. The forest was alive with the sound of hurried footsteps as Jason, Lyra, and the rebels moved quickly through the thick trees. The betrayal by Dorian had thrown them into chaos, but they couldn't afford to dwell on it. They had to keep moving, and fast. The mercenaries were closing in, and their arrival meant the beginning of the fight for Lyra's survival. As the group made their way deeper into the forest, Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency in the air. The stakes had never been higher. It wasn't just about escaping anymore. It was about winning. Lyra was the key to restoring the Quirian Empire, and every moment they lost to the mercenaries was a moment they couldn't get back. They reached a clearing near a river, a temporary hideout where they could regroup. The rebels set up a perimeter while Jason and Lyra stood aside, trying to make sense of the situation. Jason could see the wariness in Lyra's eyes. She had been through so much already, lost her family, been hunted by the enemy, and now her own people had betrayed her. But despite everything, she was still standing. Jason admired her strength, but he could see the weight of the crown she never wanted resting on her shoulders. Lyra took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the horizon as she spoke. "I never wanted this. The throne, the empire. I just wanted to live freely. But now, I have no choice. My people are counting on me." Jason stepped closer, placing a hand on her arm. "You don't have to do this alone. I'm with you. All of us are." She looked at him, her eyes softening. "I don't know what the future holds, Jason, but I promise you this. If I take the throne, if I win this fight, you will be rewarded. You'll have everything you could ever want, everything you deserve." Jason blinked in surprise. "Rewarded? Lyra, I'm not in this for rewards. I'm here because I believe in you, because I want to see you succeed." Lyra smiled, a small, almost sad smile. "But that's the thing, Jason. What I'm offering you isn't just a reward. It's something much deeper. When I become queen, I will not only rule the Quirian Empire, I will also rebuild everything that was lost. And in return for your loyalty and sacrifice, I will give you something that no one else can." Jason felt a knot form in his stomach as he looked at her. "What do you mean?" Lyra's gaze was steady, her voice filled with certainty. "You've already given me more than anyone else. Your trust, your protection. I know what you've lost by helping me, and I will not forget that. When I become queen, I will make sure you have a place at my side, as my equal, not as a servant or a subject, but as a partner. We will rebuild this empire together." Jason didn't know what to say. Her words were unexpected, but they carried a weight that he could feel deep in his chest. A partnership, a place at her side. It was more than he had ever imagined. But he also knew that they weren't there yet. They had to survive this battle first. "We'll get there," Jason said softly, meeting her gaze. "One step at a time. But we'll get there." Lyra nodded, her expression firm. "And we will," she agreed. "But Jason, I need you to know that whatever happens, I will always be grateful for you, for your loyalty, for your heart." Jason felt a strange warmth in his chest as he met her eyes. There was something undeniable between them now, something that went beyond duty, beyond loyalty. It was a connection, forged in the fire of their struggle. And no matter what happened next, Jason knew he wouldn't regret this. With a deep breath, Lyra turned toward the river, looking ahead with renewed determination. "The mercenaries will be here soon," she said. "We don't have much time." Jason nodded. They were running out of options, but they were far from defeated. They still had each other, and with that, they would fight to the very end. The road ahead was uncertain, but Jason knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just Lyra's fight anymore. It was their fight, and they would face it together. The quiet night air was thick with tension. Jason could feel it in his bones as he crouched low beside Lyra, hidden in the shadows of the dense forest. The mercenaries were coming. Their ships hovered above, casting an ominous shadow over the land, and the sound of boots crunching on the underbrush reached Jason's ears. He could see their dark figures moving through the trees, scanning for any sign of their targets. It was do or die. There was no turning back now. Lyra stood beside him, her face calm, though her eyes betrayed the storm brewing inside her. She had never wanted this fight. She had never asked to be a queen. But now, with the mercenaries closing in and the fate of her people on the line, she had no choice. This was the moment. This was the battle that would determine whether she would reclaim her throne or fade into obscurity. Jason glanced at her. "Are you ready?" Lyra nodded, her expression resolute. "I have to be. My people deserve better. I can't let them down again." Jason knew she didn't have to say it, but it was clear. This wasn't just about the throne. This was about the future of her people, the legacy of her mother's reign, and the chance to rebuild what had been lost. But even more than that, it was about Lyra finding her own strength, her own path. They had a plan, one that depended on their ability to outsmart the mercenaries. Lyra's powers had grown stronger, but she wasn't ready to face them head-on. Instead, they would use their environment to their advantage. Jason and the rebels had set traps, and Lyra would use her abilities to manipulate the elements, creating distractions and throwing the mercenaries off their trail. But it would only work if they could buy enough time for the rest of the rebels to get into position. The sound of the mercenaries' boots grew louder. Jason's pulse quickened. It's now or never. Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, then opened them again, her focus sharp. Her glowing symbols pulsed softly along her skin as she reached out with her mind. Feeling the wind shift in the trees above, she raised her hand, and with a fluid motion, she sent a gust of wind crashing through the forest, knocking branches loose and sending the mercenaries stumbling backward. It worked. The mercenaries were thrown off balance, momentarily disoriented, and that was enough for Jason and the rebels to spring into action. From all sides, they attacked, moving swiftly through the trees, taking down mercenaries one by one. Jason fought with everything he had, his instincts guiding him as he took down enemy soldiers. The rebels, though outnumbered, fought fiercely under Lyra's command. But the real challenge was yet to come. At the heart of the mercenary group was their leader, a hulking figure in black armor who had been hunting Lyra for weeks. He was ruthless, and his presence alone sent fear through the ranks. Lyra knew he would be the true test of her strength. Jason spotted him first, making his way toward Lyra, his heavy footsteps echoing in the chaos. Without thinking, Jason charged, determined to keep Lyra safe. He drew his weapon, a pulse rifle, and fired a warning shot at the mercenary leader. The shot missed, but it slowed him down. Lyra, sensing the danger, stepped forward, her eyes glowing with power. She raised her hand, and a wave of energy burst forth, throwing the mercenary leader to the ground. He struggled to rise, but Lyra was already on him, her power surging through the air. With a fierce determination, she faced him. "You won't stop me," she said, her voice steady. "This is my fight, my throne, and I will not let you take it from me." The mercenary leader growled, drawing his own weapon. But Lyra was faster. With a swift motion, she knocked it from its hand, sending him sprawling backward. She didn't hesitate. Using her powers, she pinned him to the ground, her eyes locking onto his as she spoke the final words that would change everything. "This ends now." With a final burst of energy, she struck. The mercenary leader crumpled, defeated. And just like that, the battle was won. The mercenaries scattered, realizing they were no match for the combined strength of Lyra and her loyal rebels. Breathing heavily, Jason stepped forward, his eyes meeting Lyra's. The fight was over, but the war was just beginning. Together, they had defeated the enemy, and together, they would rebuild what had been lost. Lyra turned to face the rebels, her voice filled with pride. "This is only the beginning. We will take back the empire, and we will make it stronger than it ever was before." And in that moment, Jason knew that their journey was far from over. But with Lyra by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. The future was theirs to claim. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and the scent of victory. The The last of the mercenaries had either fled or been captured, and the once threatening battlefield had grown eerily quiet. Jason stood among the wreckage, his heart still racing, but his body finally feeling the exhaustion that had been building up for hours. He wiped the sweat from his brow and looked around at the rebels. They were battered, bruised, but alive. And that, Jason knew, was something worth celebrating. Lyra stood nearby, her expression a mix of relief and determination. Her once uncertain posture was now one of quiet confidence. The battle had tested her like nothing before, and she had passed with strength and grace. Her powers had grown beyond anything Jason had imagined, and as she walked through the aftermath, she seemed to radiate something new, something regal. She was no longer just the lost heir of the Quirion Empire. She was its rightful ruler, and she had earned the respect of her people. Jason stepped closer to her, his boots crunching on the dirt as he approached. Lyra turned to him, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "You did it," he said, his voice full of awe. "You really did it." Lyra nodded slowly, her gaze softening. "We did it," she corrected, her eyes meeting his. "This victory wasn't just mine. It was ours. You helped me get here. You've been with me every step of the way." Jason didn't know how to respond. His chest swelled with pride, but there was something deeper there too, something he hadn't quite figured out yet. I didn't want to see you lose. You deserve more than this war. You deserve peace." Lyra's expression softened further, and for the first time in a long while, Jason saw a glimpse of the woman behind the queen. She was still the same person who had been lost and unsure of her place in the galaxy. But now, she was different, stronger, more self-assured. "You've already given me something I never expected," she said, her voice quieter now. "You gave me your trust, your belief in me. And that means more than any throne or crown ever could." Jason looked away, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where the first rays of dawn were breaking. He could see the light of a new day, a day of rebuilding, of change. "I didn't know what to expect when I first found you," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "But now, I can't imagine my life without this, without you." Lyra reached out and placed her hand on his, her touch gentle but firm. "And you won't have to," she said, her words carrying weight. "When I take the throne, it's not just for me. It's for all of us. And you will have a place by my side. You've earned it." Jason's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected her to say that. He had been following her out of loyalty, out of a desire to see her succeed. But now, Lyra was offering him something more. She was offering him a future, a place by your side. He asked, his voice barely audible. Lyra smiled, her eyes gleaming. "Yes, as my equal, as my partner. You have been with me through the hardest parts of this journey. You deserve more than just gratitude, Jason. You deserve a chance to help lead. Not just me, but my empire. Together, we'll rebuild it. Together, we'll make it stronger than ever before." Jason's mind raced. The idea of standing beside her, of having a say in the future of the Quirion Empire, was almost too much to comprehend. He had never asked for power, never sought anything more than to protect her. But now, in this moment, everything had changed. "I don't know what to say," he murmured, overwhelmed. "You don't have to say anything," Lyra replied softly. "You've already shown me what kind of person you are. And that's all I need." As they stood there, the world around them slowly began to feel more solid, more real. The past had been filled with loss, uncertainty, and war. But the future, together, held promise. Jason realized, in that moment, that his journey with Lyra was far from over. He had been by her side through the darkest times, and now he would be there to help her rebuild, to lead, and to create a future where her people could thrive. Lyra had found her strength, and Jason had found something even more precious, a purpose, a place where he truly belonged. With Lyra by his side, he was ready for whatever came next. Together, They would shape the future. The wind was calm as Jason and Lyra stood together on the balcony of the newly rebuilt palace. The city stretched out before them, a bustling hub of life and activity. The once destroyed empire was starting to heal, slowly but surely. The scars of war were still visible in some places, but the future was bright. The rebellion had been victorious, and Lyra now stood as the rightful queen of the Quirian Empire. It had taken everything to get here, but they had made it. Jason had never imagined this life for himself. When he had first set foot on this planet, he had been a simple miner, content with his quiet life. But now, he was standing beside the woman who had become the ruler of a vast empire. The adventure he had stumbled into had turned into something much bigger. He was no longer just the protector. He was an equal, a partner in the rebuilding of the empire. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes scanning the horizon. Her once fragile and uncertain demeanor had transformed. She was a queen now, not just by blood, but by the respect she had earned. The rebels who had once questioned her leadership now followed her without hesitation. Her people looked up to her, and they trusted her. Jason glanced at her. "It's hard to believe we're here, isn't it?" Lyra smiled softly, her gaze never leaving the city below. "It still feels unreal sometimes, but this is the reality now. We did it, Jason. We've changed the course of history." Jason's eyes softened. "I couldn't have done it without you. You're the one who brought us here. I'm just glad to be part of it." Lyra turned toward him, her expression thoughtful. "You're not just a part of it, Jason. You're a key part of this. You believed in me when no one else did. You gave me strength when I thought I had none left." Jason shook his head, a modest smile on his face. "I just did what needed to be done." Lyra's smile grew. "You did more than that. You gave me something no one else could, hope. You believed in me when I couldn't even believe in myself. You made me realize that I wasn't alone." There was a pause as Jason let her words sink in. He had never expected this to become so much more than just a fight for survival. It had become a journey not just for Lyra to reclaim her throne, but for him to find something he never knew he needed. He had found purpose, a place where he truly belonged. Lyra stepped closer to him, her voice low but strong. "Jason, when I first came here, I thought I had to carry the weight of everything on my own. I thought I had to do it all for my people, for my mother's legacy. But now, I realize that the strength of an empire doesn't come from just one person. It comes from the people who stand beside you." Jason's heart swelled. "And I'll always stand beside you." Lyra smiled, her eyes sparkling with the promise of their shared future. "I know you will, and that's why we'll rebuild this empire together. You and me." As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the city, Jason felt a deep sense of peace. The battles, the betrayals, and the endless days of uncertainty were behind them now. They had fought for this moment, and now it was theirs to embrace. Lyra took his hand, and together they looked out over the empire they would rule. A new chapter had begun, not just for Lyra, but for Jason as well. They had survived the worst, and now they would face the future side by side. The road ahead would still be filled with challenges, but Jason knew that, no matter what came next, they would face it together. As equals, as partners, and as something more, the empire was reborn, and with it, a future full of hope and possibility. And for the first time in a long time, Jason was certain this was just the beginning.